everyone, and welcome back to the Rise Factor. I am your host, Sarah, and today I have Jim Lourandos from REIV, who is the Information Officer, joining me today. Jim, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure, Sarah. Happy New Year to you and your listeners, and congratulations on the birth of Alistair.
Thank you.
Exciting times.
It is exciting, but I'm just excited to have you on because I, have known about you for a long time, being in the industry, but officially met you at an event last year, and I was like, I need to get this guy on my podcast because you were just like fiery, you were straight to the point, you had good energy, it was a laugh. Everyone was engaged, so I'm really, really happy to have you on today.
They may not be engaged after about how I'm about to start this podcast, Sarah, because I'm going to start it with the word, and it's probably going to be offensive, and some principals are going to reach out for a defibrillator, and the answer is, and what I'm about to say is no. Learn to say no to people.
Say no. I love it. I love it. I love where this is going to go. We had a chat off air before, and I think it's a really important message today, especially for our audience who is our BDMs and directors, because for Victoria we've had some really rough times where we're getting shot in all different directions. We've got a lot of landlords pointing the finger at our property managers and BDMs and directors, and I think it's about time that we start pointing some fingers the other way. So Jim, what are we saying no to in 2025?
I think real estate is an industry where we deal with people, and real estate agents, like any other profession, are trying to be people pleasers in every aspect. And I think, in my view, start saying no to business. Not all business is good business, and property managers, directors, BDMs, principals, God bless them, have an obligation to make a commercial decision whether you take this property on or not. And I've got some notes here that I've taken, but stick to what you do best. And if property management is your strength, steer clear of commercial or retail management, because that's a whole new ball game. Steer clear of owners corporation management if you've never done it before. Get some training, and in my view, education is the way to go. And it goes until the end of your career. You never stop learning in this industry. In my view, to excel and to better your skills, you need to be educated, and that applies to principals as well as the staff working under them. Principals need to be educated. Probably the last time they've been in a classroom was when they did their license, and it might be 20, 30 years ago. Things have changed, things have moved.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned before, the first step to resolving a problem in the workplace, especially, particularly for property managers, is to identify there is a problem in the first place, and not look in hindsight, I should have done this, I should have done that. Property managers have the most difficult task, in my view. They're working harder than they have in the last, say, 3 decades, suffering from burnout. It's easy for an experienced property manager to walk away. Our fees are too low for the remuneration and the workload and the effort to manage a portfolio, which is a challenge. To be a property manager, in my view, you need to be a paralegal to understand and navigate the complex legislation and representing the rental provider successfully at VCAT. Principals need to be supportive of their staff, and particularly with demanding or, in some cases, abusive rental providers who go back and lose their cool with the PM. Oh, you should have done this, get them out. Well, you just can't get them out. We can't force a renter to leave a property. Property managers need to be, I think, a mother, a father, a sister, a social worker. I think they need to be everything to a provider, to a rental provider, and the renter themselves. And we need to start the relationship by asking relevant questions. If we're going to take on a provider, ask the relevant questions. I'm going to refer to, and I think you may have heard me say this in the past, Sarah, Everybody's got one. My uncle Stavros, I want you to manage the property. But
Mm.
Stavros, there's only two cooktop burners working. Doesn't matter. We'll get it fixed later. Just get somebody in. A BDM will take on a new property, and make unrealistic promises insofar as, oh, don't worry, we'll get it rented out in a week. But hang on a sec, you haven't inspected the property. It doesn't meet minimum standards.
Mm.
There's an old clause, if the property's not fit for purpose, don't commence the advertising and we'll get it fixed during the course of the campaign. It must be ready. Ask relevant questions. Why are you leasing the property? For how long? Do you intend to move back? Is this your principal place of residence? When are you going back? Are you thinking of selling? When do you think you were selling? And again, don't make unrealistic promises that we can't keep,
Yeah.
because the rental provider will come back to you and say, but you told me this, you promised me this, and all of a sudden the relationship is on the rocks. We need to ask more questions. Evidence of ownership. If it's a new property, do we have the building permit, certificate of occupancy? Is there, and this is going to upset a few people, is there a building insurance policy on the property, and we require annual certificates of currency?
Mm.
Do you have preferred tradies? Because if it was my Uncle Stavros, he may say, my brother's really good with electrical work and concrete. Now, that's not a good relationship to begin with. Inspect the property as if you're inspecting it to buy it for a family member.
Mm.
And again, not all business is good business. Sometimes properties have a use-by date and the owner needs to inject some capital, cash into the property to get it up to standard. Don't say we'll do it during the course of the property management. If I was a renter and if you were a renter, you wouldn't like having tradies coming in to fix up the fan in the bathroom, or water leakage, or the mould that may appear out of nowhere. Stick to your property managers, stick to your management fees, because my Uncle Stavros will walk in and say, but Sarah down the road said she'll do it for 3% cheaper than what you're currently managing. Well, go to Sarah, that's my view, and say, no, we're not going to drop our fees.
Mm.
How long's the current renter? Particularly, I get the heebie-jeebies when the property, the rental provider has been self-managing the property and all of a sudden they want you to manage it. Why? In most cases, they want the renter out and they can't handle it. They've been issuing the wrong notices.
Mm.
So we need to make sure, why do you want to come to us? Are there any outstanding VCAT matters? Don't be afraid to ask questions. And if it's starting to sound too hard, then say no. I don't want your business.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Jim,
ask for clear and legible copies of any condition reports. Where is the bond? Uncle Stavros may have buried it in the backyard or his back pocket, not knowing that he has to, by law, submit it to the RTBA, the Residential Tenancies Bond Authority. These are questions that we need to ask the rental provider, and go and inspect the property. Open and close doors. Walk up and down the hallway. Make sure you're not walking sideways or walking up and down hills, because it indicates to me the property may need re-stumping. Use your nose. Your nose is the best ally when inspecting a property, because you'll smell mould, you'll smell odours that may not be consistent with a new property or a vacant property. And sometimes that may equate to water issues or water under the carpet or under the house. One of my pet hates, Sarah, is, look, I want to rent the property out, but I want to close off one of the bedrooms, or the shed or the garage won't be included because I'd like to store my property. Well, there's another trigger that says to me, things aren't looking too good here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Identify non-compliant issues, minimum standards, existing damage. When was the last gas and electricity or smoke alarm checks been conducted? Is the property fit for purpose? In other words, if you were going to rent the property with your family, would you rent this property? as is. There's a terrific case, and I'm going to find it somewhere here in my notes, where I think it was Shields v. Deliopolis, and one of the comments made by, I think it was Justice Daly at the Supreme Court, and give me 30 seconds, and I think the comment was that he made, and it's sort of, and if you suffer from insomnia, please read the complete case, 2016 Victorian Supreme Court, and it was Justice Daly, and he made mention in his last line, the duty imposed upon a land was to ensure the rental premises in good repair is strict and absolute, and imposes an obligation upon the landlord to identify and rectify any defects. He further said, the obligations of a landlord cannot be diluted by charging a low rent. And that, I think that sums it up.
Yeah.
If the property's not fit for purpose, don't rent it out. Don't make unrealistic promises. How are we going for time?
We are good. There was a lot to unpack there, Jim. I want to, let's just pull it back a bit, right? So
Of course.
here's the thing, because, you said there's so much education out there, and I even had a look at what REIV is putting out there this year, and I'm grateful to be doing some training with some BDMs this year as well. So we've got the education is there, for them, to help them and support them to get educated. Then I go on and look at, platforms online, and we can see that, yes, there are many people in the industry who are burnt out. We know that there's been some exodus, and then we've got BDMs who are trying to grow rent rolls, but they know that the staff is feeling that they're burnt out, or they've got pressure from their directors saying, well, just offer 1% less, or let's give them a free management fee. So there's a couple of things that I think where the change needs to be. One is with the leaders and directors, like you mentioned, and again, we're not here to criticize anyone. However,
No,
a lot of sales need to have that training of what the property managers need, because even in VCAT and Victoria now, it's just absolutely crazy how much they're expected to know, and we have to act as by the legislation.
We do.
I feel like more directors need to have that training of the property management and the role in itself. I think that it's about time that as a collective, we do start pushing back to investors and landlords out there in society and saying no, like what you said, no.
Absolutely. Sarah, I couldn't agree more with you. And it starts by saying no and making an informed commercial decision whether to take this property on. And the style of property that you do take on, look, I think it has the benefits down the track. You're increasing your market influence. You're solidifying your success. You're raising your revenue, and especially your profile in the geographical area that you work in, because you're going to be known as no-nonsense real estate rather than will be all things to men and women. That's not the case. The successful agencies, in my view, specialise in an area, whether it's property management, business sales, it could be owners corporation management, but they specialise. They just concentrate their efforts rather than being a people pleaser. And at the end of the day, it increases, I suppose, the portfolio that you manage and the rent roll, and I guess you're minimising mitigating your any exposure to risk if the property's not being maintained. And again, every property, apartment, a townhouse, a standalone, has a use-by date. At some stage, the owner has to inject some capital into the property to maintain it in a fit and proper condition. And there's just no way, there is no way you can avoid this. No. You can't keep managing a property that needs work done to it. And why do we do this? We want to ensure that the renter or the renters are safe.
Yeah.
Electricity checks aren't being done. Well, the last thing anybody wants to do is every time I hear a property that's burned down on the news, I just hope it's not a rental property being managed by one of our members. And I just hope that nobody's hurt, injured, or deceased in the property, because the last thing you need to do is attend the coroner's court inquest.
Mm.
There's nothing worse than going there. It's a terrible experience. I've sat in through a coroner's court inquest in 2012, and it wasn't pleasant being grilled by solicitors and barristers. It's not pleasant.
No.
And, half the time for a $60 or $80 a month commission fee, you're better off saying, no, we're not the right fit for you.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, Jim, that you're talking about that. So previous to this podcast that everyone's listening to today, go back and have a listen to the one with David Faulkner. David Faulkner
Yep,
is the general manager of property brokers in New Zealand. They know
yep,
the average age of the houses that they manage, and why they know that is so that they can proactively have conversations with the owners on bringing their properties to a better
standard.
not necessarily standard, because they're healthy homes in New Zealand, so their properties have got strict guidelines,
Mm.
but so they can help them maximize the rent on their properties so they're not depreciating these homes, right? So I feel like that I would love to see more of that in agencies here in Vic. It's like, well, how old is the average of the house that you manage, and what can you do to help your owners minimize the risks for property, increase their rent as well, because we do work for the landlords too, right?
Absolutely, and increase the asset, the asset of the property that you're managing, and make sure that in 5, 10 years' time, it hasn't depreciated in value because we haven't advised the owner that I'm making this up as I go along, the spouting or the downpipes need to be changed, which has caused issues with water ingress. Look, we have an obligation, and if we're not the right fit for it, if the balcony doesn't look too sturdy, get a builder out there to inspect the property.
Yeah.
And this is what we can go back to the owner and say, hey, listen, the patio at the back needs some work, and we need to fix it. We need to start attending to it. You may have to start putting money aside to get this rectified before somebody puts their foot through the floor, or God forbid, as it's happened recently, balconies have collapsed because they haven't been maintained. Now, property managers, amongst other things, aren't builders, but it's easy for them to ensure that if it's got a pool, get the pool inspected, and we need to be provided with a certificate of compliance. Get the balcony inspected by somebody qualified and who can say, well, yes, no, the timber is starting to rot. We need to do this. We need to do that. And it just means to subrogate your responsibilities to specialists or people who are in the profession who know better and how to deal with it. And this is not an industry that we're in, Sarah, and I know you've run with this, and I'm going to say it again. This is a profession that we're in, and it's got to be treated as a profession, because we need to be mindful. It's not just the Residential Tenancies Act or the Estate Agents Act or regulations, but we need to be mindful of the Sale of Land Act. And if you're managing commercial property, you need to be mindful of the Retail Leases Act, common law. You need to be across a wide range of acts and legislation that we need to be mindful of, that we may rely on at a later stage to go back to our client and say, look, we need to spend some money, or this needs to be attended to as a matter of urgency. And again, if the rental provider says, I haven't got the money, I can't upgrade the switchboard at this point in time, well, I don't know if I could live with myself if somebody gets electrocuted because the rental provider didn't want to spend any money to upgrade the switchboard. Now, it's got to be done. The property must be ready and fit for purpose.
Yeah. Well, let's just hope no one in Vic, though, Jim, is doing that, because there's major repercussions, and we know that. I think, though, as well, let's just keep this movement going, hashtag profession. So if you're listening to this today and you're doing a post this week, stand proud of your profession. What I want to see, Jim, though, is, property managers or BDMs have thought that, oh, that's just a job for them. Take your role seriously. Embrace
Absolutely.
the fact that you
Yeah.
are in a profession that takes a lot of skill. It takes a lot of talent, and start realizing your worth. And I think the more individuals that come from that place and view it that way, then they will learn to say no. They are going to take more control of um, giving themselves the right support that they need, standing up so that burnout doesn't happen. They're going to get better fees because they realize that how truly phenomenal they are. And in turn, then I feel like principals and directors aren't going to fear repercussions of saying no to some business because they're going to get quality landlords. They're going
Correct.
to have
Yeah.
happy team members. And
Yeah.
as an industry in itself, everyone is happier. It's not a race to the bottom then about fees. It's like we're happier because we're standing our ground, that we're not taking on properties that do not align with the how we
Minimum.
see this industry and the
Yeah.
values and the goals of what we're all trying to do. Because I think a lot of people have had enough, right? And unfortunately, the media only shows one side. But the abuse, the phone calls, how people are treating our BDMs and property managers is really quite disgusting, if I must say, Jim. So
It's unacceptable,
yeah, it's
Sarah.
unacceptable. And it's
It's
funny, we're one
unacceptable.
of those professions that people think that it is acceptable. But you don't go to your hairdresser and ask for a discount. You don't go to your doctor and ask for a discount. You don't order a pizza and ask for a discount. You don't go to
Correct.
your insurance company and ask for a discount. Well, maybe sometimes you might, but if you're getting a good insurer, you're not going to ask for a discount. So why do people think it's acceptable to ask for a discount? Because we are allowing that to happen.
And I think I started by saying we want to be people pleasers at all times, and you can't please everybody. And again, that word no is going to resonate throughout this conversation. Learn to say no,
Mm.
and if you stick by your fees, you're only improving your own saleability of the rent roll. You're only improving the quality of your rent roll, and you're you can manage three properties at a lower rate and you can get the same rate by managing one property with less headaches. You're not spending 80% of your day trying to appease a
Mhm.
rental provider who's on the phone. I've got three quotes for I'm making this up, for the change of the range hood. Oh, well, get me another three quotes. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. We've already got you three quotes. And if you don't like it, I think it's time you may want to try and either manage it yourself or take your business elsewhere. The file will be sitting on the front desk, ready for you to pick up. And the minute you say that, rental providers will say, "Oh, hang on a sec. I may already have a reputation in the town or the suburb. I've already switched over three agents in the last 4 years. I'm running out of options," and it's because they are difficult with unrealistic expectations of their property manager. And again, directors and principals need to support their staff and avoid this burnout that we're engaged in at the moment, and stop our property managers walking away to other industries or other professions. If you've been a property manager for 12 months, I think you should be knighted because you are amazing. You're an amazing person. And I think I mentioned to you before this, can you imagine a 23-year-old coming into the industry, throwing 150 properties in their portfolio, go to it, and then all of a sudden we've got a VCAT hearing? I don't think there's anything more scary than going to VCAT for the first time. Have I got my paperwork in order? Have I got the documentary evidence ticked off? Is everything there ready? Is my summary of proofs in order? It would be a minefield for these, and I use the word kids. I'm old enough to call the audience kids because I'm old. I'm a fossil. But but look, there's nothing scary, and we really do need to mentor our staff. And it doesn't mean because they're the age of 23. We need to mentor our staff at all times.
Mm.
And whether they're a senior property manager or whether they're a sales manager or whether they're a director, we need to ensure that their state of mind is in a good shape,
Mm,
and we need to also support them every way we can.
for sure.
And that's the role, one of the roles that we do here at the Institute. When somebody rings up for an issue, I like to always get into the mind of what the problem is in the first place before I say, well, here, try this as a suggestion, because you always know where they're coming from. And if they want a cheaper rate, by all means, show them the front door and say, we wish you all the best. Kind regards, loves, hugs and kisses as they leave.
I love that. So, Jim, with this, and some BDMs, I guess, look, I've made the mistake before, previously being a BDM and taking on a landlord or a property that, in hindsight, wasn't the best fit because,
Yep.
we're based on commission too, and then it wasn't worth it because it impacted the relationship with the PMs. The landlord wasn't happy at the end of the day, regardless. Nothing that I did was ever good enough. So the mistake can be made. So how can we ensure that, BDMs are still happy with, attracting new clients, the business owners are
And
happy?
that's the role of a business development manager, and that is to increase the portfolio. And again, they would be not performing in the eyes of their directors if they came in with a less quota than what or the figures or the KPIs that they've been provided. But BDMs must be mindful not to make, and I think I mentioned it earlier, don't make unrealistic promises or any warranties that we'll get this done within a week.
Great.
It's very hard to get a roof plumber out within a week, and it's even impossible to say that they'll get the job done within a week. We've got to be mindful that tradies are under the pump at the moment, and if you can get a roofing plumber to come out and give you a quote within a week, well, I reckon you've done very, very well. Especially if you're in regional Victoria, where there may be a lack of that particular trade, and they have to come from a neighbouring town. Well, you may not get them for a month in some cases, and if it's an insurance claim, well, the insurance assessor may not come out to the property for 2 weeks. It's very, very difficult to make unrealistic promises and keep them. And again, the BDM will say, oh, I thought the property manager was going to arrange this. And the property manager will go back and say, well, I thought you were arranging the trades to get this property on the market. I think the key is in your advertising, unless it's fit for purpose, don't allow OFIs or even advertise the property unless it's ready to move in. I think one of the other things I need to mention, you'd be aware of it, Sarah, is the Victorian government has also created a rental task force.
Yes.
And they're going out there inspecting properties and making sure that they meet minimum standards and fit for purpose. And half the time, our advertising gives it away that the property may not be fit for purpose. And look, they've got a job to do, and they've got to make sure that they follow their guidelines and their what they've been told to do. So please be mindful. You don't want a penalty infringement notice, and I think it's around 11,800. I would suggest the principal uses the $11,800 to invest in their Christmas party rather than pay it over to the government coffers.
Yeah.
I'd rather see him or her use it, on a holiday, maybe take the team away for a few days or a day, or
That would be nice.
it would be nice. But to avoid any unnecessary, unwarranted fines, let's be mindful that people are looking over our shoulder, and waiting for us to trip up, and that's not right. We need to be mindful.
So, Jim, last words of wisdom to anyone listening today. What do you want to see happen this year in our profession?
I think we've got to stick together. I think the industry needs, and I use this, the real estate professionals need to stick by their management fees and not be, I suppose, phantom callers where they say, I've got 3%, 2% less in my management fees. Stick by your guns. If you pay peanuts, and I have this old saying, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. If somebody wants to take their business elsewhere after you've been managing for a number of years because Sarah is prepared prepared to do it for 2% cheaper with 3 months management fee free, well, Sarah, it's all yours because you're working for nothing for the first 3 months,
Yeah.
and you're really not making any inroads into your own property management portfolio. In fact, you're going backwards. And I think we've just got to be firm. These are our fees. There is a lot more work to be performed. We as professionals have to be educated to a far higher level, and education. Pick
Yeah.
up the act, read it. There's a number of good sites available. The CAV website is pretty good for timelines.
Mhm.
The Residential Tenancies Act, once you get the hang of it and the regulations, you can navigate through it. But again, it's you just need to educate yourself where to look, what to be mindful of. Preparing a VCAT case is a completely different session all on its own. The summary of proofs needs to be clear, concise, because if a VCAT member picks up a file and says, there's a summary of proofs, there's the evidence, there's the invoices, there's the photographs, they're outlined in the summary proofs, photographs, pages 14 to 17, some invoices, pages 18 to 21. Well, I'll bet London to a brick this VCAT member has already made up their mind that the professional is presenting the evidence is absolutely right on the money and spot
Mhm.
on. And I think you'll have a far more successful outcome.
Yeah. I agree. I think what I would like to see this year and beyond is just a more unified profession. I think let's
Correct.
all have each other's back. Let's not have a race to the bottom in terms for fees and get amongst the trainings and the institute. And there's so much resources
Absolutely.
available to everyone. And let's just be kind to each other. And let's just start pushing back, I think. And really, yeah, staying together and pushing back, and because it's like I said earlier, it's about time that the fingers are pointed the other way and not just us.
And Sarah, bear in mind to our members and to the audience that there are more reforms coming in, and we just need to be mindful, need to be well on top of these reforms, and again try and lessen your exposure to rental providers who are demanding, and you're spending 70-80% of your day with one client when you can do better than that.
Better things, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. Jim, thank you for joining the conversations for growth today. As always, I love how raw and real you are, and the passion just shines through anyway when you speak. And there's so many things to take away from today. And again, we jumped on because we all want to continue to do the best that we can for our industry, but let's look after ourselves. Let's look after each other. Let's make sure that we have some happy days and say no to some shit out there.
good on you, mate. Yeah, absolutely. All the best.
Thanks, Jim.